Hi everybody, welcome to the latest episode with myself and Stephen, and it's becoming a regular occurrence. Stephen's come flying through the door, something's obviously on his mind, and he's come up with the podcast episode Lonely Exec. And that's it, it's just 2 words. So, over to you, Stephen. What bee have you got in your bonnet about Lonely Execs?
Thank you so much. It's not so much a bee in my bonnet, so much more around giving some advice and opening up the debate and the conversation. And I guess over the last few months and years, actually, I've always mentored at an exec level. So a lot of people that come to me will run their own business, or they will be in a large organization, managing large teams, and generally working at that level. And basically, a lot of them talk to me about this loneliness and about this feeling of um, isolation, this feeling of not really being able to express their emotions. And if they did, who would they talk to? Does that sound or come across as being weak? And I guess for me, I wanted just to talk about it because I think a lot of um, individuals out there that are in an organization where they are at the top of that triangle, this will resonate with. And I'm hoping that they step outside of their world and ask for help or support, and don't see that as a weakness, but see it as an opportunity. I often think with mentoring and coaching, it's about having another voice in the room that can listen to what you're saying. Because I think sometimes when you get to the top of an organization, are people actually listening to you? Or are people actually just nodding donkeys? Or are people, not really contributing to you and your thought processes because you're the boss? And I think when I talk to a lot of people in those positions, they actually want people to listen and talk to them. They actually want that. And they do feel isolated. I've not long come from a session this morning, and you could just feel the loneliness. You could feel that this individual hasn't been able to have the deeper conversation. And I guess that's what it is, Oliver. It's at that level, being able to have that deeper conversation, feeling comfortable about that conversation, not feeling as though that person's going to break your confidence, not feeling that that person's not going to understand. So, trust, integrity, honesty, those 3 things come to mind straight away. And I guess what I want to sort of explore with you, Oliver, is the longer that goes on, eventually, does that knock your confidence? Eventually, does that start to affect the quality of your work because you're not having those conversations? And let's take this one step further. Let's just say that you're also an individual that's not that proactive outside of your working environment. So you don't play any sports. You don't do much on the sort of entertaining front. You don't have anything creative that you might do. So your work becomes your life. You don't even have the opportunity to have those conversations with your friends because one, you don't have that network, or 2, you just don't. It's separate, so you don't have that conversation. So yeah, so that's where the lonely exec comes from. Does that make sense?
Yeah. No, it does. That makes a huge amount of sense. In actual fact, I remember. So I've been doing this now for just not just a lot over 7 years. It'll be my 8th year in June, and I remember one of my first realizations in year 1 is when I started working with a business owner who was effectively using our sessions for bloodletting. And then it became clearer to me that there was another problem. So this guy was very, very successful. He'd had triumph after triumph after triumph. So everyone believed in him. And that was a massive effing problem because no one doubted him. No one questioned him. And he was meeting for the first time with a little bit of failure. Some things weren't working out. He was working in his business, not on it. And I started asking questions. I was challenging back, questioning why he was doing this, why was he doing that, why wasn't he getting other people doing. There's lots of, and he hadn't heard whys, he hadn't had questions because he had family working in the business and they all believed in him. He'd done so much before, no one would dare question him, but not because they were fearful of him, but they just believed in him. He's one of these guys who would just get stuff done. And he'd got himself into a right hole because he'd go to people and say, well, what do you think? Well, that's a great idea, Louis. You know, it's like all your ideas will be great. You know, it'll do the job. And he quickly got himself into quite a difficult position. He won't mind me suggesting it. And it was a moment where I realised, holy crap, we are that person, we are that person's friend, we're their work friend or their work dad or something along those lines, because we become that person that they can speak to about things, that will challenge them back. You know, most of the time, I'm not going to pretend that I am a full-blown coach when it comes to stuff that I only ever ask questions. I'm not one of those guys. If I see something or hear something stupid, I'm going to come in and say, no, I think that's really, really stupid, and this is why I think it's stupid, because I don't think it's really helpful to just leave a burden on the client to work out what it is they need to do when you can absolutely clearly hear what they've done needs to be challenged or they need to change it. So what I'd found is this was the role that I would be playing for the vast majority of my clients. I would be that person they could say anything they wanted to, first and foremost. Many of my client sessions, the first 10, 15 minutes is just a rant, because that's the first time. Maybe I meet them weekly, maybe I meet them fortnightly, maybe I meet them monthly-ish, but that'll be the first time they've been able to really speak to anybody about it. Then it's a case of asking them posing and prodding and difficult questions, which they're not used to, and they love it. Yeah. Sometimes it's difficult in the moment, but then whether I'll get a message from them later in the day or a couple of days later in the week saying, oh no, that was really good actually. No, sorry, I swore at you, or whatever it was that's happened. But I'm saying, water off a duck's back when stuff like that happens, because they just don't have it. So absolutely, it's an incredibly lonely place out there for people who are the main decision makers. And those people that you look to around, you've got to pick them so carefully, because ultimately, if you pay them, are they really going to be as honest as you need them to be, especially if you have a bit of form of not responding hugely well to that feedback? So I do think sometimes that loneliness is self-inflicted because of how you've conducted yourself previously, or at least there is an appearance of how you would conduct yourself, which probably wouldn't be the case if people actually had the balls to talk to you honestly. And you probably only deal with these people that way because you're dismissive of them. You know, does that make sense?
Yeah, and I wonder how much of that lonely exec comes maybe from also confidence. And I guess, confidence can be a real derailer. And the lack of confidence can sometimes mean that you don't always put yourself out there because of that confidence. And I wonder if that's sometimes where the loneliness comes from as well, because you're not confident enough. And that sort of aligns with the communication. That beautiful word that comes up time and time again in organizations. And if you're not a great communicator, which, let's be honest, if we're really honest here, a lot of exec get to their position because they're very good at doing something. Their specialism is very good, whether that's more financially leading, whether that's more creative leading, whether that's more operationally leading, whether that's more around digital, whether that's more around sort of, that holistic view. You get to that position by being very good at a specialist area, which then gets recognized.
Yeah.
Or you then take that and you form your own business. Where in that journey are you exposed to good communication? Maybe on the creative side, you get access to that a little bit more, because, marketing and creativity within itself is about communicating. But the communication I'm talking about is not the external communication, it's the internal communication, which I often find gets lost. So companies put lots of effort and energy into external marketing and external communication, and very little into internal marketing and internal communication. And actually, does that loneliness come from not being able to communicate, not being able to articulate in a way that enables people to sort of gravitate towards you? And, being in business now, for over 37 years, and I would say I've not met many executive level individuals that say we're not lonely. And that's my hand on the table here. I would say 90% of them give me that feedback.
Yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, it's funny enough. Off camera, completely unrelated to this, we were having a chat, and one of the things came up about potentially getting more involved in the running of businesses. And for me, I'm not speaking for Stephen here, but from my point of view, I'm like, no, I don't. I've been there. I've been there a few times in my life, and I do not want to go back there if I can possibly help it for that exact reason. Now, I'm more than happy to help people through, but it is stressful. It is lonely, and it is hard. So I think really the first thing that I would be imploring people to think about is is that you? Do you recognize that? Be honest with yourself, because even if you are a good communicator, there's still only so much that other people can help you with. Because, for example, if you're the main investor in the company and the company you're in, the market and the world is changing, and you maybe haven't seen it coming, or it's out of your control, or something like lockdowns happen and that has a massive impact on you, they are only going to be so far affected, whereas you are obviously going to be more so. So it still isn't a level playing field. So I think that's why I quite like these groups that get together. It's nothing that I organise, but I know there are certainly some in Norwich where we're based, and I'm sure there are others around the country where these level of individuals just get together in a room quite regularly to just talk, so that they can, and it's like Chatham House rules or whatever you call it, so they can say whatever they want, and that doesn't really matter what it is. They might get challenged in that room, but nothing goes out of that room. And I really would say, if you're not going to go and find yourself a professional help like someone like myself and Stephen can give you, find somebody else who's in the same boat as you, not necessarily in the same industry, because whilst we always think our businesses are different, they're not. There might be certain qualifications you need to do it and things like that, but the day-to-day runnings of it, they're no different. And we need to forget that we need to give up on this thing that we're unique, this whole USP thing, this whole uniqueness thing. It's just all nonsense, because the days, the pressures and everything that you go through are identical, no matter whether you buy a highly qualified legal professional or, completely unskilled in terms of education manual worker, maybe running a fencing company or something like that. The pressures are exactly the same. They come from different positions, but they're exactly the same. So what I'm looking for me when I hear you talk about that is stop being lonely. Find somebody, but don't look at it in the usual places. Don't look at it in your employee base. Don't look at it in your current friend circle necessarily. But maybe just look and see if there's a business that you admire that isn't necessarily in your sector. See if you can start a conversation with the people who own that business, because they'll be in the same boat. They may not be as willing to talk about it as perhaps you are if you're now ready to, but they will be in the same boat in some capacity. Every single one of them. I don't think there's one without fail that won't be able to relate to this in some way, shape, or form. So you're not actually alone, but you are if you don't reach out and have the conversation.
Yeah, some really good tips there, actually, Oliver. And I guess we aim to give advice within this forum and give people some things to take away. And I guess some of the things you've mentioned there are really good. And the thing that really came out loud and clear there was you're actually not alone. But I guess you also have to put yourself out there to be not alone.
Yeah.
And sometimes that does mean showing that vulnerable side, and that word comes up there, vulnerability. You are not alone, but you still have to make some steps, and the first few steps might be alone. And I often talk about the way I would sort of visualize it is the first 5 steps are in the darkness, but when you get to the 6th step, you can see the light. So don't be afraid to show that vulnerability, and don't be alone. Because one of the things I will say, and I'm talking from experience here, the more you put yourself in a position where you're not lonely, I actually think it helps you, the quality that you can deliver, because immediately it can lift your energy levels. It can improve your well-being. It can start a conversation and a narrative that's maybe different, that actually injects that pace back into you as well. I'm a great believer that we all become stale. I don't care how good you are in leadership. There's a point when you start to go backwards. And some of us are very good at identifying that. And what we do is we change the landscape, we change the environment to go again and go again and go again. But if you can't do that, what actually happens is you start to either the first thing that happens is you freeze, and everyone knows that position where you're hovering and everything's quite easy. There's no stretch. There's no actual push there, and then eventually that stalemate position starts to go backwards. So what I would say is, you're not lonely. There are things outside of your normal circle that you can look to, but you might have to show an element of vulnerability.
Yeah, and I think a final point for me on that is about the loneliness thing. We're not suggesting you need to go out and suddenly meet loads of people and things like that. I can say, a bit weird this, I'm a coach, I coach people. I'm not a big fan of people in general, and I don't like big crowds, and I don't really have a massive circle of people I like to speak to. I like my own company. But I also recognise that we need interaction. We need social interaction. Now, some people need a hell of a lot more than I'm ever gonna want, but it doesn't mean that I don't need something. So I can hear some people listening saying, "Well, I don't really need people." You do, all right. You need a few, even if it's just a very small number, one or two, or anything like that. But you need that interaction anyway, and they'll be useful to have to bat off our ideas. People who you can build trust with. You can have honest conversations. You can you potentially overshare a little bit, and family will most likely be there. And I'm not talking about family. That's a different type of help. These people probably need to have no real connection with you outside of the business world. That might then flourish from there because of how open you share. But right now, we're looking for people who are on equal positions to you. They will have the same challenges, and they'll also have been through similar experiences. They may even have some good insights for you as well, perhaps if they've been doing it longer. So yeah, that's the final sort of thing that I want to say. So over to you, Stephen.
Yeah, and I would just say, don't be alone, because that's the worst position to be in. That isolation feeling, that feeling of Groundhog Day. So don't be alone, and just have that confidence to step outside and ask for that support.
Perfect. And as always, if this has triggered you in any way, you can always start with a conversation with myself and Stephen. We don't start charging at the moment you pick up the phone. We will sit down, have cups of coffee, virtual coffees with you and so forth. So by all means, have a chat with us informally. We can even point you in the right direction if working with us directly isn't the right route for you. So I hope that has at least been useful to people. Well, I know it has been. It's whether you then take this on board and act on it.
Absolutely.
I look forward to hearing from any of you that have enjoyed this or found it beneficial maybe in weeks, months to come. So we will end it there, and we'll look forward to seeing you on the next episode.